For those that just want the TLDR, Sparking Zero had an impossible task, and it came up short. It's not a terrible game, but it doesn't take the crown as the best game in this series. With that taken care of, let's get into the reasons why that is. Graphics. To start things off, we'll go over the graphics, and to make things easier, we'll break it down by category. First up, we have the characters, and it's pretty good. There are some problems with some characters not being exactly on model, but generally you wouldn't notice on most characters unless you really look. Although there is a feeling of general offness across the whole roster. That said, some characters do not look good at all. They made the characters too lanky, and it got extreme with some characters. While I know Khalifa isn't that big, she doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of the roster. And even if you don't care about her, Roshi is way too lanky here. So while I can't say they're terrible, there is work to be done. At the very least to help mix up the different styles more harmoniously. Models aside though, the animations are pretty good, minus the emote ones. Those are kinda awkward. If the characters are kept to the fighting themselves, they typically look good. Stages. For now we're ignoring how many there are and just focusing on the stages themselves. And they're probably the best looking stages in the series. Outside of the horrible pop-in, just look at how bad the grass loading in is. The water's a bit tricky as well. While you can get some interaction with it, it's nowhere near as extensive as you would like. I get it though, water is very tricky to animate. Not gonna hold it against the game, I just wish there was some cool water interactions besides being able to hide in. The stages are pretty for the most part, huge as well, with the sole exception being the Tournament of Power Arena. What is with that skybox? It's like a 480p JPEG. You can see the seam of it in the sky. It is shockingly terrible. I mean, that place was never visually appealing in the first place, but this is assaulting my eyes. Attacks. I'm gonna go far more in depth with this on a video dedicated to looking into the movesets themselves. As a quick rundown here though, the attacks are not doing great in the visual department. The attacks themselves look off, explosions are underwhelming, and things just aren't scaled up to the levels you'd want for a modern BT game. UI. It's pretty, but not very user-friendly. Take for example the character select screen. I will give them credit for giving us an option to change it to what it should have been in the first place, but not too much as you can tell this is a band-aid over the not-so-great original. The biggest problem with the default is the organization and that transformations are not under their base forms and instead just out in the open as if they're different characters. While these two problems are indeed solved with the new way, it opens up another issue in that if you wish to customize a transformation, you can no longer do so simply. You must select the character and then go back to the select screen in order to be able to customize them. While not the biggest problem, little issues like this can very easily add up over the course of playing a game for a long time. Just little bits of static that make it frustrating to play. Further bits of static caused by this UI is going through the main menu. While it is full of character and nice to look at, the slow animations to transfer between sections of the menu, as well as the constant talking, get very annoying very quickly. A UI should first and foremost be easy to navigate and allow the player to do what they want as quickly as possible. It should not take 10 seconds to get from one section of the main menu to the other. I shouldn't have to memorize if it's faster to scroll to the left or scroll to the right to get to where I want the fastest. And that sums up almost every menu in Sparking Zero. It's pretty to look at, but slow in how it functions. Also, characters talk way too much in the menus. I get some banter can make things fun, but it's on like a 2-second timer. You can put more time between these. A common problem across many aspects of this game. Things are hidden or not intuitive at all in how they work. Take for example, selection of Team 2. It's simple enough to hit L1 and change things, but your first time in the menu is very easy to miss how to do it. I feel style was favored too much over function in some key areas. So it's a pretty game on the surface. Once you dig in a bit, it starts showing some flaws. However, it's mostly good. Outside of one stage, it will be fun to look at and sit down and just watch fights. And since they will be nice on the eyes as long as you don't look too close. Sound. As games are audio-visual mediums, talking about the sound is the most logical second step. Effects. Again, I'm going to make a review on movesets themselves where I'll go into way more detail on the sound effects, but the short version here is the effects are okay, but they don't pop the way they should. Music. This is where Sparking Zero really shines. I'll give the music team all the credit in the world as this soundtrack is awesome. It has a large selection of music covering many different types of mood and feeling for them. It made making moveset videos fun as I had clear heroic and villainous music to pick from. While I could pick out tracks from other games I might like better, as an overall soundtrack, Sparking Zero wins easily, the best in the series. The music carries the game hard. I also like how you can assign characters themes basically by giving them their own music when activating Sparking mode. The effects do drag things down though, but at least you can listen to some nice music while being disappointed in the impact of that punch. Story. Probably the first mode you'll play upon getting the game. There are many examples of how this has been done before, but how did Sparking Zero handle it? First, you pick one of 8 characters: Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, Trunks from Super, Frieza, Goku Black, or Jiren. When selecting a character, you will only do fights and such that character was actually in, and for some reason, some of these stories will end much sooner than you would expect. After picking a character, you'll get little bits of story, mainly told through still images. Don't expect big cutscenes here because there really aren't any. So presentation-wise, the game is not so great. But then again, most of them aren't. It's not an RPG, so we don't need an exact retelling here. It can get a bit boring sitting through after a while though. The biggest problem that I have with how this story is done though, is how after clearing a stage, I would have liked if you went back to the stage select instead of it just going. The main reason this got to me so much was due to the big highlight of the story mode, that's the what ifs. Upon clearing certain conditions on certain stages that the game is not the best at telling you about, you're able to split off and explore a short or longer what if that the game has. The short ones are usually earlier ends to an arc. The longer ones are what we're going to be looking at here though. Some of these are just sort of whatevers, such as a what if where Goku ends up basically doing Namek Saga on Earth, to far more interesting ones of Gohan actually did stuff in Super. I'm not going to go through all of them so I don't spoil everything, but some of them introduce things into this game that should exist outside of these what ifs, but don't. Much like movesets that only exist in story, we have forms that do as well. For example, we have a Scouter Vegeta that has gone Super Saiyan. This should be a form that you unlock from doing this what if. I'd even say that Goku early should get an alternate Super Saiyan form as well from the same one. This is the biggest mistake the story mode makes. The what ifs are restricted to story mode only when they should be able to be unlocked so you can have fun with that awesomeness. Difficulty. Since release, I did hear that they made the game easier, but I don't know if that's true or not. Regardless, the main problem here isn't if the game is too hard or not, rather how you don't really have a choice. Instead of a simple, nice difficulty selection, you have a normal or easy as the only options. There should have been a simple way of selecting easy, normal, and hard. Easy for those that just want to do the story, normal, and hard for those wanting a challenge. This is a Dragon Ball game. The story mode should not be content you need to practice to get good at in order to beat if you don't want to. The problem is compounded by having the what if paths blocked if you're not playing on normal. There's no reason for this. Challenge modes are the place if you want this type of thing. Everyone should have access to the full story mode without having to worry about the difficulty. There is a way to clear these stages on easy and still get the what if conditions, but it's pretty annoying. You can use a wish from the normal Dragon Balls to get a one-time use item that will allow you to play on easy and still get them. If someone wants to play on easy to clear, they probably don't want to put in the grind to get these items to let them do so. Typically, people who want to experience the story are not the same people who want to go do grinds to prep for an ultimate raid, so the system exists for the wrong players. To quickly go over the what if conditions, there are various things. Usually beating someone quickly, a couple of things on this. 1. The conditions are not displayed in a clear way. I have no issue with conditions and small challenges in order to alter fate and change the path you're on. However, the conditions should be clearly marked, and they should give you things like a timer so you know how close you are to having to hit retry. While the what ifs can be fun, the whole system is overly complicated and difficult. Due to all of this, it's not on the better story modes. Even if you want to skip cutscenes to get to the fight, they make that take forever. On top of that, most story modes are too short. And why is Jiren even here? It's a fairly weak mode, which is really bad due to how few game modes there are in this game as a whole. Game modes. There really are not many of them, but let's go through each one. Tournament. The classic tournament mode. Always fun to see and always fun to do. These can be great places to grind out money and experience a lot of different fights that might even introduce you to unique interactions you were not expecting. Too bad they ruined it here. The reward for winning are so terrible you really have no reason to return once you get the first clear, which is a real shame because each tournament had its own set of rules for how they work. Getting the first win was fun, but due to them being so pointless to run more than once, it feels empty. This should be the place to get Zenny, but alas. Bonus battle. This is the big mode of the game. Infinite content made by fans, but they kinda suck. Now part of this may be due to the fact I play on PS5 and there's no crossplay, so I would only have access to stuff people made for PS5, but I never saw anything interesting while scrolling through. Another problem with having all the content being made by people is if people leave, then there's no one to make content, and more people leave because there's no content. The good old death spiral. It also doesn't help that the interface for searching for content is so terrible. Maybe there's better content for PC, but as the editor seems very obtuse to use, I think a lot of people just gave up trying to make anything. Also, I feel as if something like this really needed more options, like a survival mode, time attack, etc. Actual different modes rather than just a place for people to make tired Kappa versus Gogeta meme levels. Whatever this Broly thing is. As I write this, there's another mode that was added where you get points by fighting a Broly. It's a mode, so I'll cover it, but it's not great. You just fight one opponent, and that's it. There's an easy, normal, and hard difficulty. You get points, and you can try to get a lot of them. It's very grindy. Grindy is not how to get casual people to play, and casual people are how you get the average player numbers up. Also, it's temporary, so who knows if this will even come back in other forms later. Online. I'm not the most PvP person. I view these games as more fun party games rather than competitive. So maybe the PvP is good, maybe it's terrible, but I'm not going to review something I don't do. If I had to guess though, I assume that most games are people using OP characters and spamming moves over netcode that's terrible. Customization. Now this is what I'm all about. As an RPG guy, playing with stats and making builds is what I'm all about. Also, I feel customization is a key part of these games. As Dragon Ball is partly about training, getting stronger, and breaking your limits, a system that lets you do that is a key component. The sad thing here is, there isn't much of it to do. Partly due to item selection, but the biggest reason is that there's no real modes to use them in. You can use items in verses and tournaments, and that's it. Which makes it harder to want to even interact with this system if you don't really need to. In terms of how it works, you no longer have the normal and 3 customs. Instead, you have one for player 1, player 2, CPU 1, and CPU 2. I'm not a fan of this approach as it requires you to copy and paste loadouts if you want to use the same one across multiple instances of a character. There is a system in place to save loadouts, so the process is not bad, but I just think having the normal and 3 customs would have been easier and better. That's not to say it's all bad though, far from it. They have a section for accessories, so they no longer take item slots. There are a few exceptions, and AI items also have their own sections. This is definitely something the series needed. This one very obvious thing missing though. Getting to auras in a bit though, the actual items themselves. Well, they only take 1 slot now, no matter what they do, so that's good. But it does make the lower tier items feel very pointless, as the higher tier ones are just better. Sure, you can stack them, but unless you want to min-max that hard, you could have gotten much stronger ki instead of trying to pump out every bit of physical damage though. Overall, it's not too bad. What I wish it did have was something more like Raging Blast 2, where the weaker characters could equip more items. It wasn't enough to make them the strongest characters, but it did help to make the gap smaller. As for the aura items, there are no aura items. This game has some of the best looking auras and we don't get the items to equip them freely? That sucks. Also, while I'm here, I do miss the little bits of aura that you'd get if you had high amounts of ki. Instead, only certain characters have auras visible, and they're just on all the time. They had the auras, but they didn't fully put them in. Class system? Ever since one of the first trailers for this game, I was thinking how fun and interesting it would be to have an actual different classes in the game. Having characters with different traits actually fight differently, like strength characters not having long combo strings, but might fight like in Raging Blast 2, where they have the ability to chain smash attacks together for high damage, or fast characters that can do long streams of rush attacks, as well as other different traits. Things that could make characters feel different while still keeping the basic system of having things be simple. Now, I have been told that Sparking Zero does indeed have a class system, but two things. One, the game makes no mention of this anywhere at all. There are no tags or labels or anything to show this. Two, if there is this difference, they're certainly not big enough to notice as the game feels just like BT3 or Raging Blast. I certainly haven't dug into this to really test things, but I will say that even if they are indeed there, I think making them far more extreme would make for a more interesting game. In general, Sparking Zero did good though. Only 7 item slots still feels a bit limiting, but with every other item only taking 1 slot, it doesn't feel too bad. What does are the items don't feel like they have much impact compared to previous games. I think we have a good base for a system here, we just need a few more features and things to really make it what it could be. Gameplay. I'll start this off by saying I am not heavily into competitive PvP, and I mainly see these games as a way to have fun and don't dig deep into the mechanics. So I'm coming at this from the viewpoint of a casual player, you could say, so just keep that in mind as I talk. For the most part, this game is like BT3. You've got your basic combos and your smash attacks, you can chain things just like before. There are changes to things, but if you've played BT3 or Raging Blast, you know what to expect here. What I will say though, our combos here feel floaty. They don't feel as if they have the same weight as before. This might sound weird, but it feels as if there's too many options for how to chain a combo, which makes me feel like I'm just mashing buttons instead of really learning. Another aspect of combat that irks me a bit is the number of defensive options seems too high. It always feels like the defender has an option to deal with whatever you do. Having ways of stopping attacks is important, but they just went overboard here. It seems no matter how you approach someone, they can just stop your combo and say, "No fun for you," almost instantly. There should be times when you catch someone and they should just have to accept taking damage. Maybe they made defense so overwhelming because damage is so high. Damage is a bit overtuned here and makes it so fights can end very fast. Still, some bumps aside, it's basically like playing another game in this series. I'd say it's still a bit under the others, but it's still fun. DBZness. This is always a fun thing to talk about, just how well this game captures that DBZ spirit. Or what's left to talk about anyway. Stages Part 2. And here they are coming back. This time to talk about how many of them there are. And yeah, we're missing some. For me, the lack of an Arctic stage really stands out. Partly because the Arctic stage on Raging Blast 2 was so good, but also because that's where the Broly movie was and it's clearly in here. I do like the alternate versions of stages, such as the tournament stage that's more than just the arena itself, but those are more extras and not really replacements for stages. I won't name every stage I'd want to see, but if it had just 3 more, I think it would have been pretty good. I think the amount of stages we have is fine, so I won't judge the game too harshly here. What I will say is I wanted more stage interactions, such as in Raging Blast you could throw someone into a wall or break the ground. While I do like you can damage a stage in Sparking Zero, I do miss how you could interact with the stage to actually do things, rather than just see the damage you've done. Also, with how big stages are, I feel like they're really asking to be blown up more. The side stages aren't really used, and I feel they should be somehow. Roster. Oh, the roster. This one's pretty tricky to talk about. On one hand, yes, it does have the biggest roster. On the other, there are some weird characters missing based on who's in the game. So while it's big, it has these little things bugging you about it. It doesn't feel like the ultimate roster. DLC exists now and they've already added characters, so the roster will get bigger, but having to pay for Super 17 will really suck. This game has a lot of character interactions. A lot that you wouldn't even expect to. This is a bit of a minor thing, but it's always fun to have these in games and see, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention them.
In the end, your kind always kneels to me.
What's the deal with this green glowy power? If you and Kale can tap into it, wonder if I could become like this too! That'd be nuts!
Movesets. I'll bring this up here. There are no customizable supers in this game. I bring this up here because it mostly hurts the movesets, but I already made a video on that topic, so go watch that if you want all the details. And I'm gonna make that moveset review, but don't worry, I'll still talk about stuff here. You only have 2 supers and an ultimate, which really hurts the movesets. Also, having such a large roster also hurt characters to having generic moves. The quality of attacks also varies widely. You have some really bad ones and some really awesome ones. The quality swings wildly without much in the middle. It also hurts that characters in the story could have different supers or ultimates, but you can't change them. So while the movesets aren't nearly as good as they should be, it's not all terrible, as some characters have pretty awesome ones. Conclusion. The developers had an impossible task. Making a sequel game for this series is basically doomed to fail unless you hit everything perfectly. Look at the choice between making a smaller roster with better moves or a larger roster with worse moves. No matter which one you pick, something is wrong. So while this game is a bit of a mess, it has a structure to become an amazing game. Here's hoping they don't just do endless DLC and we actually get a sequel game. I would say this game falls right in the middle of the series. Not better than BT3 or Raging Blast 2, but better than everything else. I do think a Sparking Zero 2, though, could easily take that #1 spot.